Hiya, I'm in Sligo, and when I was here about 20 years ago, there was a shop up the road here that had been changed from a butcher's into something else entirely. And unfortunately it was the weekend and it was closed and I didn't get to go in. So I'm going up there now and I hope it's open and I hope it's still that new kind of shop.
What I'm working on here now is, I'll just turn it around. Just the girl of many gifts: fertility, breast and womb, the cauldron, generosity, salmon of wisdom, harp for culture. I'll have two ravens here, and what I'm working on this side now is the guardian of the woman, the wolf. And this is a piece of sycamore, top class wood, windfalls, raw materials. They're beech and sycamore, a bit of ash and so on.
And are these stories from Irish mythology or are they, where are they coming from?
I make them up.
You make them up?
I know all our myths and legends have reflections in other parts of the world. You know, the three women, Éire Fóla Bonda, Colleen Ban Colliach, girl, woman, old woman. You discover that not only do you get them all over the world, Aphrodite, Hera Hecate, Clodagh, Lachesis, Atropos, same women, different stories, local flavours, right down to some of the details. Here in Sligo now, I don't know whether you know Sligo or not, our local lake, for instance, now is notorious for erotic adventures. And this girl now, she could have many names, but if she was Finnever, who's Guinevere, Jennifer, the lady of the lake, her young hero comes courting her, Freach. He's a handsome young prince, naturally, and he tells her she's so beautiful and so desirable and so stately and so wealthy and so highborn. He's so much in love with her, and she, being an Irish woman, says, so what? Put your muscles where your mouth is now, you see. Anyway, make a long story short, she has him swim back and forth and back and forth and back and forth 9 times to the to the Lake Isle of Innisfree, which takes his name for the 9 sacred woods. Hazel, whitethorn, blackthorn, holly, so on. And when he brings her the 9th wood, she says, Tatu mai hinsanishke, you're good in the water. Mugroga dangantu, I give you my strong love now. But there was another but I just dropped my ring in the lake. Now, to make a long story short, he dives for the ring, the salmon has swallowed it, he catches the salmon, the bradon fasa, and even in the Gospels you'll find the shekel in the fish's mouth. And so he pushes her ring onto his pinky, and up he swims then in triumph. He's completed his hero wedding feats, but of course he hasn't. Because he's forgotten about the Dowercoo, the beast, the thing in the darkness, and it guards the salmon, but it also hunts the salmon. It's guarding its own prey from other predators, so it surges up from the dark pool. It's very dark pool, very cold dark pool, and seizes him in the most embarrassing part of his anatomy, you see. Now, he's a hero, which means he hasn't much in the way of brains. He has left his sword on the bank, so he calls out in a high squeaky voice for a weapon. The whole thing takes a flippity flop now. It turns over. She rescues him. She takes his sword, dives in with his own sword, and arms him in the lake. And how Freudian can you get? They become lovers in the lake. They beat off the Dowercoo, and he renames his sword, because heroes put names on their swords, their weapons. Head slasher, kingslayer, leg beater, you know. So he renames his sword Callad Bullock, bright striker in the dark, Caliburn, Excalibur. She's Finnever, Guinevere, the lady of the lake. So the whole thing is just a version of the Arthurian sword and the stone, you know. So I was telling a local druid this, you see, it was a big city. This is the old butcher saw. It's awful handy. But I do most of the work will be done by splitting out the wood with a wedge.
This is the old butcher saw.
The old butcher saw, yeah. I used to be a butcher. When I left school in '57, the wife hates me telling people this because I've repeated it over and over like the ancient mariner. When I left school in '57, in the leaving class there was 45 fellas. 23 of them went on to be priests. So in those days you did what you were told, did what was laid out for you, or you wound up cleaning out toilets in Sydney and nobody ever saw you again. And I became a butcher here in my father's butcher shop. Is getting it for her son and daughter-in-law. And of course I started off as the worst butcher in Sligo, naturally, and then I morphed slowly into the worst butcher in the Western world. And then 10 years later I started carving, for one reason or another. Now I didn't start cold turkey, I actually worked with clay and plasticine. By the time I was 10 I could do anything. Lions, tigers, John Wayne, Wild Bill Hickok. But the trouble with being a butcher is you're always nicking your fingers. Minor cuts, I haven't lost any of my fingers. But I worked with fellas and I have them coming into me now. We have great crack talking about the old days. They never minded cutting their fingers. They'd be dripping on a bit of T-bone steak. It wouldn't bother them. Yeah. But I hated it because you couldn't make a good plasticine figure. If you had a nick here, it showed up on the plasticine, you know.
Yeah.
So one thing and another, I started into the wood. My father thought I was an idiot. My mother knew I was an Amazon. Nobody paid any heed to it. Even the fellas I went to school with, you know, it's just silly Mickey doing another of his silly old obsessions, you know. And I wasn't married at the time, 1968. And I brought them in here because I'd only my own bedroom. Sold away at them. Started to sell immediately.
When did you make the change from
1988 on the 23rd of May. I said, hump this. I'm not. Well, my dad was dead by this stage, and I would have felt I was letting him down because he was a great cattle dealer and everything, and I was a complete washout. But so I just said, suddenly, that's it. No more meat.
And did you not have a family to rear and everything?
Oh yeah, but I was already selling a few. You see,
so
I was selling.
I
was selling anything I could do, to mostly tours. But as soon as I gave up the meat, the whole thing went flippity flop, and now it's at least 75% local. I had my sister in there, and she was in a solicitor's office as she just happened, and there was one of my carvings on his desk. Oisin went off to Chernobyl with Niamh on the magic horse, and they had 300 years of a honeymoon, you know. My wife says to me, we'll be married 50 years next year. Well, I said, maybe it just feels like 50 years. Wrong answer. You know, I love a good wisecrack, but you really should watch your mouth, you know, because sometimes people don't get it. I was coming up the street the other day, and this fella came along with a big pit bull, you know, and I said, morning. He says, I was talking to the dog. but he got it, and he laughed, and the dog laughed too.